Yeah, this is it. This is the last one of the summer seminar series. So today we're just going to kind of review everything. We're going to tie everything together. Um, yeah, so I did a version of this back in 2018 when I first got certified as a health coach, and we only did 8 lessons that were like 45 minutes long. That was just like general nutrition stuff. The next year was the first one I did that was specifically about the keto diet. I thought was like all the rage at the time, and did that one, and then hadn't done it in 5 years, and so pulling out all the material and redoing everything was pretty fun. We did 14 lessons. Um, yeah, right. So renting the pavilion. Thanks for not busting the place up. It was $50 per week to rent this and reserve it. It is a deposit, so hopefully I get that back at some point. But yeah, so we, over the course of everything that we covered, our very first lesson, we talked about how bad the state of nutrition currently is. Anywhere from 88 to 93% of Americans considered metabolically unhealthy right now. Really, really bad situation that we're in. We spend more on healthcare than we do anything else in this country. And if you just drive around and look at whatever the nicest new sweet building is in any city, it's like your dialysis center or cancer center or something. It's really bad. Next, we talked about calories, talked primarily about calories in, calories out. The idea that to lose weight, you need to move more and eat less, and what the downstream effect of that is. We spent a whole lesson talking about the macronutrients, so proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and how the three of those interact, what they do, what they don't do. We gave recommendations around how much of each of those to have. We did a 2-part lesson on the big fat surprise. So really the history of why we think fat is bad for us. I reached out to Nina Teicholz, the author of the Big Fat Surprise, after we did that lesson, and told her, sorry, we stole the name of her book to do the lesson. She said that was okay with her. Yeah, really the quite insane idea of why we think cholesterol causes heart disease, which was our next lesson. Cholesterol specifically, we talked about the ins and outs of how cholesterol functions and why we think it causes heart attacks. We talked about insulin resistance, the major disease behind disease X, what they call it, or metabolic disease, how our bodies produce insulin in response to especially high carbohydrates and how we become resistant to that insulin. We did a whole lesson on the 3 foods that we encourage people to avoid. So refined sugars, refined grains, and seed oils. We did a lesson on the players, the people who make our nutritional recommendations. You think that, for example, the government committee that writes all of our guidelines every 5 years, the next one is going to be in 2025, that they're all people that are, neutral and are doing the best studies and trying to figure out the best ways for Americans to eat, when in reality, 95% of them all have financial conflicts of interest. We talk about the blue zones. We talk about Seventh-day Adventists and how the cereal companies are started. We did an entire lesson about ketosis. What is ketosis and how that relates to what most people's goals are, which is just fat burning, not necessarily promoting quote unquote the keto diet, but just promoting a fat burning kind of state to be in, and how the body shifts into ketosis. We talked about mental health, how diet relates to mental health, the latest research on that kind of stuff that's coming out, which is pretty cool, about depression, anxiety, even more severe stuff like dementia, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, that kind of thing. And then last week we talked about food addiction, how the cigarette companies ran their play of getting people addicted to cigarettes, how they did the same thing with the food companies, when they bought the food companies, all the tactics they used to get us addicted to sugar in particular, and whether people should be moderators or abstainers and avoid the whole thing. So that's all been awesome to cover. Again, this is week number 14. So the goal today is to talk about kind of everything else and tie everything together. First thing we're going to be talking about is not necessarily what to eat or what not to eat, but purposely not eating anything, which is intermittent fasting. So this is a really interesting topic that has gotten much more popular in the last few years. I noticed I noticed intermittent fasting when I was doing tests on people's metabolism. So we learned really early on that as I was measuring somebody's metabolic rate, the number of calories they were burning, if they did a calorie restricted diet, they simply ate less, they moved more. Again, we talked about this in lesson 2, that what would happen is when we measured their resting metabolic rate or the number of calories they were burning, they would be burning significantly less calories after doing a diet. So yes, if you eat less, if you move more, you create a gap in those calories, and the difference between those calories will cause some weight loss. The problem is it also makes your metabolic rate go down. So that was pretty obvious to us as we were starting to do those measurements. Over time, as intermittent fasting got to be more and more popular, I would encounter people who were doing fasting and they weren't eating that many calories. It was as if they were on a calorie restricted diet, but the body was responding very, very differently in that their metabolic rates were increasing. They were teaching themselves actually to burn more and more and more calories through fasting, even though they weren't intaking as many calories as the people doing the dieting. So it was really confusing to me how that would work, because in my mind, these people were calorie depriving themselves, and thus their metabolic rate should have been less than it was, but the opposite was happening. And it wasn't until I got into the low carbohydrate kind of space that found out low carb would work really well for weight loss, but also people, when they started eating that way, were becoming so full and satiated with their food that they were naturally starting to do intermittent fasting. Nobody had to tell them that they should be doing fasting. They were just kind of doing it naturally on their own because they were really full at the times that they were eating, and so they could go longer and longer and longer periods between meals, which essentially is intermittent fasting. So that was quite interesting, and I came across the work of a doctor named Dr. Jason Fung, who wrote a book called The Obesity Code, which was absolutely crucial in my own personal understanding of why fasting would increase the metabolic rate. What is it about not eating that would make your body burn more calories and not less? His work was awesome. He had a podcast that I really loved that was really helpful. You've read Obesity Code. Yeah, it was one of your favorites, wasn't it, in the beginning? I love it. It's a fantastic book. I should probably reread it. But yeah, he talks about, in one of the best examples that he gives in the book is if you think about how you store your calories and how you store the food that you eat, you have a tiny, tiny amount of storage for carbohydrates inside the body that runs out really quickly. You fill it up really quickly, which is why the overconsumption of lots of carbohydrates can be problematic for people. But you also have fat stores, and the fat that you store, most of us have more than we like. We want it gone. It stores all over the body and is jiggly, and we're trying to all get rid of it. Each one is a valid fuel source for the body to use. It's just that in our current nutritional state, when carbohydrates are plentiful, and we've told everybody that fat is bad, including and especially saturated fat. We changed the diets. We blamed everything again on cholesterol and saturated fat. That we teach ourselves to always rely on the carbohydrate fuel and not rely on the stored fat fuel, which again, we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of calories that we can use for energy. So the way he compares it is basically like, if you think of, you have a fridge on your main floor, and every single day you're filling up the fridge. You go to the store, you buy new food, you put it in the fridge. Throughout the day, you eat that food, and you just do that every single day. That's a really kind of easy system, and you take your food from your fridge, essentially. What happens over time, if you stop buying more food, you stop filling up that fridge, over time, you're gonna need to find another place where food is stored. And you might remember that, like, oh yeah, I never go down there, but I have a basement, and in my basement, I have a chest freezer, and I keep an entire cow in there. It's not as convenient. I don't go down there very much. But now that I remember it, that can be my food source. And if you trek downstairs and move all the boxes off the freezer, you might find that there are a huge store. There's a huge store of food that you had kind of forgotten about. And Dr. Fung makes that comparison of, like, if you're used to only filling up the fridge, you might forget about using the freezer for fuel, and that's kind of a longer term freezer. It's a little bit harder to get to, but once you get there, there's way more food in it that you can live off of. I really like that as an analogy. And again, he writes about that in his book, The Obesity Code, which I highly recommend. But basically, fasting or going longer periods of time of not eating really force the body into a fat burning mode where the body must burn stored body fat in that state. It's also important to, I think, kind of define what fasting is. A lot of people will say that fasting is just not eating, going any period of time of not eating. So everybody fasts at night, for example, when they go to sleep until they wake up, unless they're snacking in the middle of the night. But anybody who can sleep through the night knows that is a fast. They're not eating. We don't die when we don't fast. And it's because our body is shifted over to using the fuel that's already stored up inside the body, which is the fat. And your body burns fat as a fuel source. Again, lots of different ways to define it. Some people call, multi-day fasts, extended fasts. Some people call it intermittent fasting. Other people call it a nicer term, which is time-restricted eating. That's the way I like to define it for anything that is a fast less than 24 hours long, which I think is perfectly safe for most people. Most people can go any period of time inside of 24 hours without eating. And again, you don't die when that happens. Your body just shifts over and starts using it. So I like to call that time-restricted eating. I like to call fasting something that's longer than 24 hours, which is also something that people can do. An extended fasting may be longer than like 2 or 3 days. So fasting is, in my opinion, the gold standard of what will work for not only weight loss and fat loss, but overall health for most people. The body does a few really cool things when you start to intermittent fast. We already talked about the effects on the metabolism, how the body burns more calories in a fasted state because it's accessing all the fat, the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of calories of fat that we store, which is pretty cool. Fasting also triggers something called autophagy. Autophagy, if you break down that word, means autophagy. It's the two kind of components of that word. Auto means self, phagy means eat. So it literally means eat yourself. And the body goes into that kind of a mode when you start doing intermittent fasting, you start going longer amounts of time without food. The body will then get really resourceful and start to kind of organize or reuse different substances that may have not been working properly in the body, including protein. So an example I'll give as far as this goes is imagine that you are building a building, and every single day in this building, you get a new delivery of bricks. So a truck comes in, drops off all the bricks you need for that day to continue building your building. If you break bricks during the day, you don't really care because that you already have new bricks ready to go. And so if you break a brick, you might just chuck it in the back in a pile where it might sit for an indefinite amount of time because you don't need it. You've got new bricks coming in all the time. If the shipments of new bricks were to stop, that might be a problem because you might think to yourself like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? How am I going to build my building without these building blocks, without these bricks? But then it also might force you to become a little bit more creative and think like, well, wait, what about that pile of bricks in the back? There's a lot of broken bricks back there, but maybe if I'm really resourceful and I take 2 broken bricks and put them together, I can recycle them and make a new brick and use that to build my building. And so again, that's an example that I like to use to explain autophagy to people who are unfamiliar with the concept. And it's really pretty cool, again, how the body recycles proteins. I have heard many, many, many stories of how important this is as far as shrinking cancer cells. At the health conference I was just at, the Symposium for Metabolic Health in San Diego, in the conference center, I could look around and see several different people who had diagnoses of cancer, multiples of them that I've talked to on my website, on my podcast, who were in that room who had really, in a sense, like put their cancer into remission, if you want to use the word cured or not. They were able to shrink their tumors down to where they were more operable and were able to be extracted much easier. One woman was using fasting during her chemo treatments as something that would make the chemo treatments work much better and have way less side effects. When my mom had cancer, the side effects from chemo were terrible. And this woman just cruised through on all the different rounds of chemo that she did. And she would just do like a 3-day fast during her treatment. And by the end, she didn't have any side effects on any of her treatments. So that was pretty cool. I've heard lots of different stories as far as autophagy and people having a surgery and maybe something was left in the body that got absorbed by the body from a surgery. I've heard stories of, again, tumors or growths or issues fixing themselves when people started to do fasting. So again, those are all just anecdotes and stories that I hear, but still pretty interesting stuff. That's a huge benefit from fasting. It's a recycling of those materials. One other thing to say as far as autophagy, it's pretty cool if you Google search fasting before and after pictures, you'll see people in the after pictures that don't look like they've been overweight ever. Because of the autophagy, what happens is the body can recycle its own skin after somebody's lost a lot of weight. That's all available protein that the body doesn't necessarily need for skin anymore. It can be repurposed to do other things that the body uses. So this is definitely something that I've seen. Again, I encourage people to Google fasting before and after and just check out the before and after photos. We all know with weight loss, one of the things that people complain about is the excessive skin that remains, and you can do surgeries and that kind of thing to help with that. But autophagy is definitely something that will also help with the skin. I don't think it's 100% fixed for everybody, but it is quite interesting when you see those pictures. So again, I encourage people to go and do that. Intermittent fasting, for like the kind of recommendations that I like to make for people, fasting is perfectly safe. Doing extended fasting raises more questions, and so I don't recommend that as much, although we know that people have done it. There have been studies done where people were fasted for 40 days and they measured the different kind of fuel sources that people are using throughout a 40-day fast. There is a guy, I want to say Scotland, somewhere in the United Kingdom, that did a recorded fast of over a year. I think it was like 380 something days. Big guy, wanted to lose some weight. Again, medically supervised. I believe they gave him vitamins and minerals and watched his electrolytes throughout the fast. But he lost a tremendous amount of weight by not eating for over a year, which is incredible. I've had clients that have done different forms of fasting. My recommendations for people as far as fasting goes is to keep everything mostly in the 24-hour or less window. Again, I just think there's more complications and problems once you push past 24 hours. I think it's much easier, and most people can do that kind of fast. I make a recommendation also for fasting that fasting should be simple. It should feel like it's quite easy for you, which tells me about the content of your diet. If your diet is mostly coming from whole foods, especially proteins and fats in particular, but devoid of the carbohydrates, the sugar, the grains that we talk about as the things to avoid. Once you start eating meals that come mostly from protein and whole foods and fat in particular, you notice, like we said earlier, that your meals are really filling and satiating, and you can go a much longer time between meals without the desire to snack. Maybe you wake up, you're not really hungry for breakfast. That's one I see quite commonly. And so I don't like people to start with fasting, but once fasting becomes something that feels really natural and normal, I think it's something that people can start to push in the window that they are taking in their calories and push out their fasting window and see if 12 hours was comfortable, can somebody do 14? 14 is comfortable, maybe somebody could do 18. I don't make a specific recommendation of how much it should be every time. Again, I want it to be really natural and organic for somebody. But most people notice when they start to incorporate fasting that where they thought hunger was like really linear, like if you got hungry 4 hours after a meal, then you'd be much hungrier 5 hours after a meal, and you'd be much hungrier than that after 6 hours of a meal. It's not so much a literal hunger that people experience. It's more like waves, where hunger will come and you'll feel hungry for a little while. And then if you just kind of go on about your day, the hunger seems to subside a little bit. And people find that where they were really hungry at lunchtime, but they might have been busy, they got back to work, they may have found that actually 30 minutes later, 15 minutes later, hunger was gone and they didn't feel hungry at all anymore. So I hear that one all the time. And that I think is a really cool and natural way that people can incorporate some intermittent fasting in their life. Another great way I've heard it described, I love this, my favorite example. I interviewed somebody in the United Kingdom. His name is Aranda Wickramasinghe, and he described his hunger. We've probably talked about this before, but he described his hunger as a bully. And every time he felt hunger when he was eating the normal, standard American, standard English diet, he would notice that the bully would come crashing in, would shove him down, give him a wedgie, steal his milk money, and make him pay attention to the hunger. It was a really severe hunger that required his attention right then, regardless of what he had going on, whether he was on vacation with his family, whether he was at work and busy, whatever he was doing, he had to stop what he was doing and pay attention to the hunger. Once he changed his eating in the way that we are recommending by, again, focusing the diet on whole foods and proteins and fats in particular, his hunger became more of a friend. And that friend would stop by, usually around his normal times when he'd get hungry, and would say, hey, it's in the area. It's just kind of our normal time. Like, do you want to hang out? Like, if now's not a good time, I can come back later. And so in that way, his hunger changed from being a bully to just becoming like a really good friend that would tap him on the shoulder and stop by every now and again for a visit. So I thought that was a good example. Again, I think intermittent fasting is a wonderful tool that can be used for most people for great results for all of the reasons that we talked about. You'll see on the references on the back that there's a podcast episode I've done about fasting in particular, but I've done several, so you can look through there or just message me and I'll give you more recommendations. But that is a great tool that works for a lot of people to really enhance their results. Again, I don't recommend it for people who fasting is not really accessible for. When I was on a more standard diet myself, part of the religion that I was brought up in would do a once a month fast for 24 hours. It was the worst day of the month, easily. I spent the entire month dreading this one day, and then would have to do this one day without food, and was absolutely terrible. I was so starving because I was eating foods that would make me really, really hungry, and I wasn't good at fasting. So if fasting feels like a chore, feels very difficult, feels really forced, I don't recommend it for you until you address the diet and become really satiated with your food. And then fasting will become very easy. If you do choose to do extended fast longer than 24 hours, the thing to really pay attention for more than anything is your electrolytes. Excuse me, I really recommend that somebody take an electrolyte supplement. Maybe they mix some electrolytes in their water. I really like the Keto Chow product called Fasting Drops, which is an electrolyte solution, really concentrated. I just add a bunch of drops to my water. It helps give it a better taste and gives me electrolytes that I need. The Fasting Drops are a good one because it's designed specifically for people who are concerned with their electrolytes during fasts. Also a good idea to have some salty things on hand, no calorie kind of things like pickle brine that's really salty can really help with people if you notice that you're feeling lightheaded or you're getting cramps or headaches. Those are all things that can help, which ironically also help when you transition your diet over to a more kind of healthy whole foods or low carbohydrate version to begin with. A lot of people complain of what they call quote unquote keto flu, which can be greatly alleviated with salt and salty things. So those are some recommendations there. It has been cool to see people do different versions of fasting in the past, especially with extended fast. I had one client in particular who had done a few weekday fasts, meaning he would eat on Sunday night and then he wouldn't eat again until Friday night. So 5 days without food. Essentially, he would lose about 1 pound a day when he did that. So the weight loss results were phenomenal. The weight that he would lose would primarily come from fat. So lots of times we see weight loss where people are losing a bit of lean mass. We validated this on a body fat scale that he would lose 1 pound of fat pretty much every single day that he would be fasting. And it was quite interesting because I would train him on Tuesdays and Fridays. And on Tuesdays, the day that he started, the day after he started his fast, or 2 days after, that's the day he would feel the hungriest. So he'd feel the hungriest on Tuesday, but then by Wednesday, the hunger by and large had gone. And on Friday, he would feel so energetic, not hungry at all, would feel amazing. And we would do our lower body workout on Friday. And I watched him PR deadlifts, get records on deadlifts on the very fifth day of a fast, which to most people, they'd be like not eating for 5 days, yet you have more energy on the last day of the fast, would make absolutely no sense until we understand the science behind fasting, behind ketosis. Again, we've gone into the weeds as far as that goes. We don't really need to do much of that today, but all that to say that fasting is a wonderful tool that can be used. So that's the first one we talk about today as far as things that are unrelated to food, and this is more like not eating, so pretty cool. Next, get exercise. I get asked about this obviously all the time, obviously, as a personal trainer. Movement and exercise, just like humans are really good at fasting. We were born to fast. We are also born to move, and born to move in a wide variety of different ways. So I think it's pretty awesome. We just had the Olympics. I marvel every time all these athletes coming in from all over the world. Obviously, they have different genetics, different strengths. Different countries are better at some things versus others. But you see all these different body types doing a huge variety of different kind of sports and modalities. And as a species, we're really, really good at being generalists. Generalist just simply means we don't really specialize in like one thing over another. We can throw, we can run, we can jump, we can. There's so many different movements that we can incorporate as humans, which is pretty cool. So again, I've divided this into two different categories. One I'm calling movement, the other I'm calling exercise. The key points that I wanted to make here are that, again, movement is part of what makes us human. It's one of the healthiest things that we can do, not only for our bodies, but like we talked about when we talked about mental health, I think that movement is just as good for the brain and brain function as it is for the physical body. Again, to steal a quote from Dr. George Ede, which I'm paraphrasing, basically like last time I checked, I think the head and the brain are part of the body. So it makes sense that it would be good for all of that. But another cool example, I guess I'll say, is like we have, as a species, also already developed computers that can beat us in chess. But we don't have, we'll never create a machine that can reach out and pick up a chess piece and move it with the grace and ease that a human is able to. That's a concept taken from a book called Go Wild. It's one of my favorite books. And it's to say that, like, you look at a brain and you look how big it is and you think it is there to store facts and information and all the lyrics of your favorite songs when you were 15. But really, the larger part of what the brain actually does is coordinate movements. And we take it for granted that there's so many incredibly complex movements that we do in our day-to-day life. I mean, even just if you really sit down and think about what's involved in walking to your car, opening the car door, sitting down, and then driving somewhere, coordinating all these crazy complex movements when you think about it, and you're not even really like consciously thinking about it. Most of us just drive and get from one place to the other, and we're hardly even thinking about driving. It's just kind of subconscious at that point. So the brain is a big part of what the brain does is coordinates movement. And so movement is super healthy for us. Recommendations around movement is really just to find things that you love and you enjoy and to work them into your life, whatever that is. I don't like to get too nitpicky about, what activity is better than another. Most of us have things that we really enjoy and we do because we love them, even though they might carry some amount of risk or injury or whatever. We still do these exercise movements, because we love them. So to find whatever thing it is for you, for me, I love to cycle and paddleboard and ride my bike. I already said that. Play hockey. All those things to me is not a chore. It's something that I really enjoy, and those are ways that I get my movement in. The other thing that I really highly recommend for people is walking. Walking, in my opinion, is a linearly beneficial type of movement, meaning that the more you do it, the more benefit you can get. It's done at a low level, typically burning lots of fat when you do it because it's done at a low level. Obviously, you hear things about like 10,000 steps a day is the goal. I don't make recommendations as far as how much somebody should get, and I also don't recommend that somebody just go out and start getting way more steps than they're used to. I like to start at where you are and just gradually add over time. If you're getting 2,000 steps a day, maybe you can try to get 2,500 and see how that goes. This is also where I like to address the types of things that we walk in, footwear. minimal footwear. I transitioned several years ago into minimal footwear, which you can see is this is all I wear in the summertime. It's just a very thin platform that allows my toes to spread and makes walking much more enjoyable and builds strength in our feet. Most of us are stuffing our feet into shoes, which are way too tight and don't give our feet room to kind of move around. So when you are walking, I do recommend transferring over to a minimal style of footwear. That's a whole nother topic. We're not going to get into that. That's the movement side of things. On the other side of things is exercise. And people have lots of different ideas of what exercise is. And I put exercise there really mindfully to just make a point that when you're thinking about exercise, if we're dividing exercise into two different categories, let's say one is what we traditionally think of as cardio exercise, which is kind of interesting that we even came to the term cardio or came to think that that type of exercise was good for the heart. Is a really interesting story we won't get into today, but we now, when somebody's jogging down the street, we'll say to each other like, yeah, exactly. We'll say we either want to, we'll say that they're exercising, but if the same person was running down the street, or if time travel back 50, 60 years ago and somebody was running down the street, you would think something insane was going on, or you would think that person was insane. It's just not something we've ever really done for a really long time. So again, when we're thinking about splitting up exercise between cardio exercise and strength training exercise, the best way I can say this is cardio exercise, what we think of cardio exercise, will make you efficient at burning calories, meaning it will teach you to burn less and less calories the more that you do it. So the example there is I never run. So if I decided to go run to the end of the street and back, it would be a train wreck and I'd burn lots of calories because my form wouldn't be very good. It's not an activity that I do. And so I don't have good form. I'm not very efficient doing it. So as I start running, I will burn a lot of energy. Now, if I kept practicing running and kept running, what would happen over time is my form would get better. My movements would get kind of tighter. I would become efficient at that movement. And ironically, the more and more I do it, the less and less and less calories I would burn doing it. So where it sounds like being efficient with your calories is really good, and if you're an endurance athlete, it certainly is. You do want to be efficient with your calories so you're not burning through all your calories too soon. That's a really good thing, but for most people, for general health, they don't want to be efficient burning their calories. They want to be inefficient burning their calories. They want their body to be burning the excessive amount of calories they already have that come from stored fat. So again, when we think of exercise and we think of cardio exercise, that is something that over time is going to teach us to burn less and less calories the more we do it, which can be quite counterproductive to most people's goals. Strength training, on the other hand, makes your body burn more calories. So you don't burn as many calories while you're doing it, but strength training teaches your body to burn more calories for you all the time. So that is what we promote for people as far as the exercise goes, a lot more than we do the cardio. If you love biking or running or whatever, that's fine. You can do that for sure. I would definitely recommend a heart rate monitor when you do it, and I would recommend using a formula known as the MAF, or maximal aerobic function formula. This was developed by an absolute legend in the fitness industry, Dr. Phil Maffetone, where he has shown that if you take your age and basically take 180 and subtract your age, you will come to a number that should represent a heart rate range that you want to keep your heart rate at most of the time. Some people like doing high intensity intervals, and that's obviously a very short push with a very short recovery repeated several different times. That is shown to have lots of benefits, but for kind of steady state movement, take 180 minus your age, and that's your target heart rate. There's some caveats to that, and you can look up Phil and his work to be able to validate that. But by doing that, what you'll notice is, again, you'll be able to become more efficient doing that activity, which if that is your goal, that is a good benefit. You might notice that keeping your heart rate at whatever your number is, 140, let's say, for somebody my age, 40 years old, keeping your heart rate at 140, maybe right now you're only able to run 5 miles an hour, but if you keep doing it, you might be able to run 6 or 7 or 8 miles an hour, which means your body is doing the same amount of work, but you are going faster or further. So this is something that we were able to measure quite a bit when I was doing those metabolic assessments. So that's a way to do cardio if you are going to do it. That's a way to maximize your time doing it, maximize your fat burning. Now we come to maximizing your strength training. So I've included with this handout for today, I've included, oh shoot, I got cut off. I've included a strength training workout as well. So this is a very basic kind of strength training workout that I give to a lot of my people if they're looking for something very, very simple to do that will provide the maximum amount of benefit in the least amount of time. So always when you're doing exercise, the more you can do, the better. Some people, really love to exercise. They've got time during the week. They like to go to the gym. They'll go and work out for 45 minutes or an hour, and they'll do that several times in a week, and that's totally fine. The more you want to do, the better. But what we're talking about today is called maximizing strength training. So this is the minimum, the very minimal effective dosage that we can give somebody for strength training that will get the most results. I'm talking this workout could take about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. As you'll see on the workout, there is a 10-minute warm-up for walking, so that's not included in the 15 to 20 minutes. I did include a few really basic exercises for the middle part of the body or the core as kind of like a warm-up, so things like planks, bridges. I've included a rotational exercise in there. Those are just like simple ways to warm up. Those are absolutely optional as well. But I did include 6 different movements here that use resistance bands. So this is pretty cool that you can pick up resistance bands. Do you use resistance bands? This set of bands, you can see 4 or 5 different ones. I got this on Amazon for $30. So very, very inexpensive. The different thicknesses obviously are different resistance levels. This set in particular is a loop set. So this works as a loop. It's a closed loop, obviously. You can also buy handles that snap on if you're doing an exercise and you want a nice handle that makes it more comfortable. These come in sets of 2. And the handles are like, I don't know, I think I paid like $8 for these. So out the door, like $40. And these can be used anywhere. In a park, at your house, you can buy a mount that attaches in your door where you can stick these resistance bands. And the 6 exercises that I have put on the program here are what I call the Big 6. So these are a combination of 6 different exercises. They are a combination of pushing and pulling. So 3 of these exercises are pushing the bands. 3 of these exercises are pulling the bands. And they're balanced also kind of, they're basically what you have is an upper body push, an upper body pull in the horizontal plane, so in front of you, an upper body push, an upper body pull in the vertical plane, which is a shoulder press and a pull down, and also a push and a pull in the lower body, the 2 most basic being a squat and a deadlift. Those 6 exercises, again, totally balanced for pushing and pulling, use all of the major muscle groups. They use multiple joints every time that you do them. So you're getting the best bang for the buck. The biggest muscle groups are always found in the middle part of the body, which these ones focus on. The smallest muscle groups are in the periphery of the body. So the further away you go from the middle part of the body, the smaller the muscles get, the less impact you get over doing these certain exercises. And if you'll notice, the recommendations for how many sets and how many reps that somebody should do is 1 set. And all I did was put a recommendation for time, which is 120 seconds. So this is an interesting concept that really changed my perception of strength training. I'm not going to get into all the details here, but if the goal for strength training is to tell your body, send a signal to your body to make muscle, that signal needs to be really, really, really strong. So for example, if I go to a gym, I grab some weight, I'm going to do a bicep curl, and I say I'm doing 3 sets, 12 reps. I do my first set, set it down, play on my phone for 5 minutes, piss everybody else in the gym off. Don't do that, by the way, if that's you, don't do that. Do my second set, set the weight down, do my third set, and I'm finishing, and I finish my curls, and I go 10, 11, 12. I set the weight down, I move on to the next machine. What I just did is I told my body that my current level of strength is already included in what I can do, meaning I didn't have to really strain myself to lift that weight. I was easily able to do the number of sets and reps. I was already able to do that. There was no real challenge there. It might have been a little bit difficult. I might be getting a little bit of sweat on, but there's no need for the body in that moment to say, hey, we need to build more muscle. My muscle was already way adequate to do that exercise. And the body is lazy. As we evolve, the body is always trying to find ways to save calories, not to just expend them all the time. So the body doesn't necessarily want to add more muscle mass, unless it absolutely has to. So the concept is when you're doing a lift, you want to be able to signal to your body that your current level of strength is actually inadequate and you have not adapted to the level of strength that you need. Meaning, as you're pushing a weight, you want to take that lift as safely as you can to a level of, whether you call it fatigue where it's extremely difficult, or failure where you cannot lift the weight safely without changing your form. You need to get somewhere in that level to send a signal to your body that you tried to do something that you were unable to do with your current level of strength. If you can do that, the body will then say, whoa, we don't know what this guy was doing. Body doesn't care whether you're, lifting a weight, stretching a band on a machine, or pushing a boulder off of yourself, or, I don't know, arm wrestling a bear or something. Your body can't tell the difference. All it knows is that you tried to make it do something that it previously couldn't do, and now it needs to shuttle resources into building more muscle, making bone density be stronger, and make your connective tissue be stronger as well. All of those things are super healthy and really great for people. We know how many people have bone issues, how many people get injuries in their joints, and how muscle, again, is inefficient. So it's always burning calories for you. It's one of the very few places that you can store carbohydrates. We've talked about that before. You store carbohydrates, a tiny, tiny, tiny amount circulating in the blood, a little bit in the liver, a little bit more muscle mass. So if you have more muscle, you can be a little bit more liberal about your carbohydrate intake because you'll have more space to put that in. Another concept that I wanted to talk about when we're talking about, so that's the failure concept. You need to get your lifts all the way up to failure. Another concept that we talk about, and the reason why this is only one set recommended, is it's not about the sets and reps that take you to that level of fatigue or failure. It's about getting there. And whether you're doing one set, or whether you're doing 3 sets, or whether you're doing 5 sets, whether you're counting reps and doing 10 reps or 20 reps or 30 reps, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. What matters the most is sending that signal to your body. So this workout is only one set for each of these 6 exercises. The catch is you take it all the way to that level of failure. Once you do that, you don't need to do more sets if you don't want to. Thus, again, this is keeping that workout to be the minimal effective dosage, the least amount of work you can do for the most benefit. Let's see, am I missing anything? A lot of people talk about fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers. Your body determines different amounts of muscle fibers to recruit to do certain different activities. So I know I can punch somebody in the face. I can also pick up this pen. How does my body decide how much force is needed to pick up the pen versus punch somebody in the face? Obviously, that's a completely different level of force that requires your body to recruit different levels of muscle mass. So a lot of people know that if you're going to do a sprint, you need quote unquote fast twitch muscle fibers. And to do something like sitting up or walking or low level activity, you need slow twitch muscle fibers because those move you slowly and fast twitch muscles move you quickly. And that's actually a misnomer. Slow twitch muscle fibers are slow to fatigue. Fast twitch muscle fibers are fast to fatigue. But that doesn't mean that you only work fast twitch muscle fibers by moving fast and slow twitch muscle fibers only by moving slow. It's actually, again, a question of how much force do you need and a question of recruitment of how many fibers do you need to be able to do a particular activity. What that means practically is you can move slowly, and moving slow actually can use fast twitch muscle fibers. Your body will slowly burn out all the muscle fibers it needs in a lift, starting with the slow twitch muscle fibers, the least amount of muscle to do what it needs to do until they fatigue. Once they do that, your body will continue recruiting different levels of muscle fibers. There's several different subtypes. It's not important for our chat today, but your body will continue recruiting muscle fibers until they all fatigue out systematically. What this means is you can do these workouts extremely safely, moving slowly, using whatever you have available to you, whether that's a full gym or whether that is a few bands in your house, and you can get the maximum benefit out of those exercises. What's up?
There she is.
Yeah, I know. I know, you're probably almost done.
No, you're good. Yeah, we got a little bit to go. We're almost there. The one thing I found that like sitting up here, I'll sit on my leg and then my foot will fall asleep, and so trying to like wake it up and walk around is quite difficult. We're talking about strength training, and we're talking about so today was all about all the different other things in lifestyle to bring things together. So we've already talked about fasting. You can catch all of that online at the link below. We've been talking about the difference between different types of exercise and movements. What we're talking about here is maximizing strength training. If you weren't working with a trainer, you didn't have time to do a lot of workouts, you wanted to get the most bang for the buck in the least amount of time, the workout that I just handed out to you would be that. So it basically has a 10-minute walk just to kind of get moving. It's got a few different exercises to do for the middle part of the body. And then basically it's 6 different exercises, which we've already talked about, and doing them one set to muscle fatigue. So the 6 exercises, I've got a band set up. The 6 exercises that we're talking about, we've already kind of mentioned. The first one is an upper body pull, which would be a row. So a row looks like this. If I'm doing this exercise, like we just talked about, I can move slowly and recruit fast twitch muscle fibers. And all I'm doing is pulling this band. By moving slowly, I'm also guaranteeing that I'm not going to get injured. I would do this workout with a 10-year-old. I would do this with a 40-year-old who has no experience with exercise. I would do this with my grandparents who are in their 90s. You cannot get hurt by moving slowly. I'm feeling a burn accumulate. Debatable, right? I'm feeling this like burning. I'm not breathing that hard, but my muscles, it's really quite intense. This feeling of like burning in the muscles. You get to this point of like kind of anxiety where you just want to get it done or you want to quit. You'll have a tendency to want to like speed up a little bit to get it over with. Most of my clients will want to quit at this point. So I'll tell them sometimes like, hey, if you give me one more rep, if you keep going, I'll give you a free personal training session. And they'll go, oh, okay. And they'll do one more rep. And then they'll be like, oh, awesome. Okay, where's my free session? I'm like, I'm not giving you a free session. They'll be like, what are you talking about? You lied to me. And I'm like, well, you lied to me. You said you couldn't do another rep, and you could. So you lied to me first. So no free personal training session. But anyway, you just get to this point. Your muscles start shaking. You just are not able to do any more work. That's it. One set to that level. And this workout program, again, the big 6, the last 6 exercises that you see there are only those 6 movements. Again, using total body, compound all the joints. So from there, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever it is, it's recommended 2 minutes on the program, but that's not important. What's important is you take yourself to a level of failure, fatigue, then you flip it. Next would be a chest press. So whether you're looping a band on a tree, the park, the banister of your stairs, like all of us survived through the pandemic. We were personal trainers through the pandemic. You can work out anywhere. I've trained people in the weirdest places, trust me. Chest press is now pushing this way, same idea, slowly just moving a weight in front of you. Machines are perfectly fine for this as well. A lot of people poo-poo machines because they're on a set track. They're totally safe and very effective, and like neighborhoods like ours, really cool. We have a rec center available to all the residents. That's great. Use those. Like anything to do the movement and to do it safely. Again, moving slowly, chest press is the opposite exercise. You're now working the front part of your body until shakiness, fatigue, failure, done. That exercise is done. Next would be another upper body exercise, a pull down. So again, whether you're looping a band over something or you're sitting in a machine and doing a pull down, either way, or even if it's something in front of you and you're just tipping forward like this is now a vertical pull. Different ways to do it, doesn't really matter. It'll just hit different places, whether you go underhand, overhand, neutral grip, play with different options. They're all fine. They just hit different parts of the body until total muscular fatigue, failure, done. That exercise is done. Shoulder press. Again, these bands, Amazon, like these were $30. There's a shoulder press. Moving slowly, up and down, can be done with free weights, can be done with bands, can be done in machines until that's it, done. Last two exercises you're going to see there are going to transfer everything to the lower body. So you're going to see a squat. If you're using these doubled up bands, this is like pretty convenient. It shows, I think it shows on the workout where he's doing a squat like this, standing in a loop band, or with a band with handles where he's holding it up here. I actually prefer holding it low. So I'm going to just step on these. The band's going to run underneath my feet with a loop band. This is what we call doubled. So like the band is passing under my feet twice. I'm holding the band on either side. A squat is a push using my lower body and bending at the knee, trying to keep my chest upright, but I'm pushing. Push, like that. Again, same idea. You can take that one set to total, like, failure, done. Done with that exercise. Last one on the plan is a deadlift. One of the most important exercises to do, but be careful on a deadlift. You want to make sure you have good form on a deadlift in particular. Form is important in all of these, but deadlift in particular, because this is now a lower body pull, similar to a squat, but we're transferring the movement from the knees to the hips. So now my glutes are doing a lot of the work, and so are my hamstrings, the back of the legs. Slight bend in the knees, back stays straight, butt goes out behind me, chest stays high, but all that movement comes from the hips. You can see why this is important. This is a movement we do all the time, picking something up off the ground, but we know people get hurt when they do it. So by doing deadlifts, you strengthen what we call the posterior chain, everything on the backside, which needs to be strengthened. And the most important thing on a deadlift is if you hold something on your chest plate and on your belly button, that distance during a deadlift should not change. It should be exactly the same, which means you're not articulating your spine like this, where most people get hurt. They're in a compromised position. The distance from your chest to your belly button doesn't change. It's just you're moving from your hip. As long as you're doing that, staying mostly centered over the band. If you're using a bar, you want the bar just to run as close to your shins as possible, all the way up. We call that a vertical bar path. Same idea, take that to where you are feeling like you're very challenged. Definitely not to the edge of like getting hurt, but you're feeling like that exercise was really challenging. That workout, I'm telling you, there's a personal trainer telling you, if you did that one time a week for 15 minutes, that's it.
One time.
One time.
Oh, wow.
One time. That would be what I would give you as the minimum effective dosage. What's the least amount that will give you the most benefit? More people need to know this because people think they have to do workouts, and it's great. Like, people like working out and it's fun, and if there's other movements that you can do, those are just 6. There's all kinds of ways, like we talked about, to move your body and be healthy and that kind of thing. Some people, it's part of their social. They like to go to a gym. They like to, again, be social with people. This is if you're just looking at exercise, I want to do the least amount for the most benefit. This is it. This is it. In the beginning, if you're just starting to strength train, doing more than once a week will give you more results. So if you're just getting back into it, doing this twice a week or 3 times a week We call it beginner gains. Like just doing more of anything will be fine. The more you do this, the more you get used to taking yourself to that deep level of fatigue, it goes the other way. It's actually the less times you should be able to do this. So here's an example. And I always tell people, like, look at your hands. I'm going to use my foot as an example. It's really uncomfortable. I skimmed something on my little toe, took one layer of skin off, and that's already been like 3 or 4 days. It hurts way more than it looks, but it really hurts. You can see that that area is still red. It's still puffy. It's inflamed. It's nowhere near being healed, right? You might look at your hands and see, maybe like a scar or something that you did a week or two ago. Like this one just barely got better. I bashed my hand on a chainring on a bike. That took like 4 weeks to kind of get better. What we're talking about is like little nicks and cuts that we accumulate and they stay like healing for a long time. What we're doing with muscle, when we're taking our muscle to that level of fatigue, is you are micro tearing all of the muscle in your body. You're doing damage. You are always, always, always less healthy leaving the gym than you are entering the gym. Always. As your body looks at it, there is no benefit to entering the gym. The benefit comes when it builds itself back up afterwards. That's why we go to the gym. It's uncomfortable. We don't like it. Challenges us. It's the challenge that then sends the signal for our bodies to repair and regenerate, and that's where the good stuff is. If you look at your blood markers, like left or like leaving a gym, you'd look like a train wreck. It'd be terrible. So just keep that in mind, and all that to say, like when you start getting good at these workouts, you should not be able to push yourself to the level that I'm describing more than once a week. And I know plenty of people that get to a level where they cannot do this workout more than like once every third week. And they're like jacked, very healthy. So again, like all different kinds of movements are great. There's different exercises, obviously, and different ways that we can move. But if you're looking for, like, seriously, like if you wanted to never hire a personal trainer again, you wanted to go grab some of these bands, $30, grab some handles for $8 and run that exact same workout for the rest of your life, that would be incredibly beneficial, again, for bone density, for your connective tissue, for your muscle mass, all the benefits that we already talked about. Again, the most benefit for the least amount. Again, more people need to know that because we make it too complicated, we make it too expensive. It's a shame because this is accessible to anybody. If you didn't even have the $40 for the bands and some handles, most of those exercises you could do at a park, on a tree, with your body weight, at home, with water bottles. Like there's always things that you can do. But the point is, with strength training being the healthiest way that we can move, doing occasional resistance training, taking your body to that level of sending a signal to get strong, it's a very, very, very best thing you could do for your health. And again, I feel confident taking kids through that, and I would feel just as confident with like an 89-year-old. Again, just the fact that most people, as they age, they're not consuming nearly enough protein. They're having bone issues and arthritis and joint pain and all these things. And then we know what happens when somebody takes the fall, their bones are already weak, and it's game over. Like, I can't remember what the statistics were of, like, if you enter the hospital having fallen, it's like a pretty good chance you're not coming back out. This addresses all of that. It makes you stronger. It works those fast twitch muscle fibers, which can work quickly and recruit a lot, so that as you stumble, you can catch yourself and not fall. And as you fall, your bones are stronger, everything's protected more, you've got more muscle mass. It's just across the board the most beneficial thing you can do.
But like bones, like my mom who had osteoporosis, you
Yep.
know, I mean, how can you?
You have a bee friend by your... Yeah, I know.
I know he keeps going over. How can you? Is there a way to make your bone? I mean, I don't know. Calcium. I mean, that's what we used to hear. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
It's different now.
Yeah, great question. Calcium is part of bones, but I think the idea that like we need to go out of our way to like supplement or drink tons of like homogenized pasteurized milk was probably like a little bit more oversold. I think the easier thing is consuming a decent amount of protein. And the strength training, like if you think about your bones, they're not exactly like totally firm. Like they have some give to them. It's almost like this pen is if you're doing regular strength training, this is what's stimulating your bones to help them be regenerating and making more of themselves. And so I would say I'd want that person to focus on protein, get a decent amount of protein for what they need, do some strength training, whatever level they can, do it safely. Again, I know people who have literally been bedridden and they can't do anything, and somebody hooks up a band and they just sit in bed and pull a band at 650 pounds and they get better. They get healthier.
Yeah.
It's completely accessible to anybody. Those are the things that I would focus on the most. We had the talk about the plant toxins, and you were there for that one.
Yeah.
So remember that oxalate is the chemical that will get into your body and seek. It's negative. Is it a negative ion? So it seeks electrolytes, in particular calcium. Wade, do you have any good things to say about calcium oxalate these days?
No, I do not.
Some pretty fun kidney stones.
Also, they cause kidney stone. If you, okay. Yeah.
And they cause gout.
Oh.
Yeah,
Which
these.
is a type of arthritis.
Yep.
Oh, is it?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're not friends of oxalate around here. There are things that we consume that look for and find and bind to certain things, including calcium. So making sure that oxalate is low in somebody's diet, not just over consuming spinach year round, for example, or tons of almonds and things we've been talking about as far as like toxic superfoods. Those are things that I would really avoid. But the thing I would say that most people getting the most benefit is like they're so far under their protein, not even close to getting protein. The protein they are getting is not, it's so much like plant-based you can't absorb very well. Just because you put it in your body doesn't mean it's going to get absorbed by your tissues. Animal-based proteins are a lot more absorbable. They're already in the form that we need. So I would say for somebody like that, again, they can make improvements. They can start now at whatever level they're at. But I would focus on protein and strength training.
And then, like, he was talking about kidney stones. Like, I don't know how many years. 20? Oh, isn't that one? 15? I got them, like, almost back to back within 6 months of each. And they kept telling me, you're not drinking enough water, you're drinking too much soda. I mean, does that contribute to, or is it, I mean, I don't know. And I cut back, and I haven't had them sent. I mean,
good.
I would, but
Yeah, good. I would guess I should know this, and I should have a better answer for you. I'm just going to go on my hunch. My hunch is that fructose is very much insinuated, very much related to gout. And people with high with gout symptoms typically will have high fructose. A lot of people will talk about gout and uric acid related to purines, which is related to red meat. But that's actually never been proven in good studies. It's more the fructose. And so I'm sure the pathways, since they're related in gout, are probably related in the same way to kidney stones.
okay. Yeah,
Would be my guess.
That was just all they kept telling me.
Yeah.
And not that I still have a hard time drinking a lot of water. I'm just not.
Cool.
I don't drink a lot of, I mean, if I do, I open up a bottle and I could, 3 days I could be like a diet.
That's impressive.
No, I can, but my kids are like, ew, it's probably out of this, but no, I'm never, maybe years and years ago, but I can't sit there and drink even refills.
Yeah.
They'll keep wanting, and I'm like, no, I'm not even going to drink. I probably
Nice,
drink
that's
that
good.
much.
Yeah. I think it's one of the hardest things to do, but if somebody were to start on healthy eating, I think one of the biggest things they could do to improve that is anything that is sugar dissolved in water. If you just cut that out, and again, it's not the easiest, but if you did that, I think that would be a huge jump for most people, or at least reduce it. The sugar that comes in soda in particular is fructose, high fructose corn syrup, and fructose, again, we've already talked about this, but fructose will drive aggressive behavior and drive eating more food. It's the drive that you would have had if you came across a bush that had fruit in it so occasionally it would drive you to eat as much as you possibly could for as long as you could before that food was unavailable. That's how it works in the body. There's a great book called Nature Wants Us to Be Fat that is all about that.
Nature wants us
Nature wants us to be fat. Yeah, it's just pre-programmed in us that like when you see, this is why sweet is always good. Salt, there's a point when you have salt and it's you can't have salt anymore. That's your body self-regulating exactly how much salt you need. So if you're salting something and it tastes really good, it means your body needs salt, and you should continue salting until all of a sudden like it doesn't taste as good anymore. It's like if you've ever eaten like really good salted movie popcorn, it's delicious, and you get to the point in the bucket where it's just like, oh whoa, like I'm done. Like that's your body self-regulating. Salt, sugar does not have that because sugar should be so exceedingly rare,
Right.
so exceedingly rare.
Yeah, with salt. See, and I don't even, I guess because of high blood pressure, years and years, I don't hardly put salt on. I mean, I like it a little bit, but it's like when things are, I can't stand it when they're salty.
All overly salted.
But I don't know if that's still the problem with salt and
Yeah.
all these things have changed.
The recommendations on salt are very much like the recommendations on fat. A lot of it was crappy science, a simple idea that never really panned out. There are some people who are salt sensitive and they need to be careful. It can drive blood pressure, but it's in a much smaller percentage that people think. And people are told to specifically avoid salt when it's a very essential nutrient in the body. So another really good way to know about salt is think about, are your hands and feet cold? Are you getting cramps? Are you getting headaches? And or are you getting lightheaded when you go from seated to standing? Those are some simple, like, if that's the case, in fact, inevitably, anything I have with me will typically have a salt container.
Oh, okay.
And I keep these around. This is Redmond's Real Salt, which is cool because it's local to us here in Utah, Redmond, Utah. Redmond Real Salt.
Oh, Redmond.
Yeah. And so I keep this around. This is a tiny little container. It's about the size of a AA battery. And I'll show people. This is 6 grams. This is about the recommended amount that I recommend for people every single day. There's a lot more than what the standard recommendations are. And I'll keep it around. I'll notice if I'm drinking too much water. That's probably something we should have talked about today. We're not going to have time. But like the advice that we're told to drink 8-ounce glasses of water or whatever. Drink water when you're thirsty. Don't worry about it otherwise. Try to keep it to water, but you can drink to thirst. If you start peeing clear, you've gone way too far and too much water.
Oh, it is.
Yes.
Because I always hear that, and I'm like, even if I drink a lot that day, it's still. I'm like,
yeah.
How come? And that's what I was told.
Yeah. Yep.
Like,
more water.
Yeah,
Yep. It pretty much happens every year somewhere on the planet that somebody does a marathon and they're running, and every aid station they're drinking water and they're exercising, meaning you're losing sodium, and they die.
Yeah, that's why my husband, he brings the salt stuff when he writes.
There you go.
But,
yeah.
Well, you probably.
Yeah. There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So if I'm ever noticing that for myself, maybe it was hot, maybe I wasn't paying attention, I did have way too much water that wasn't salted, I'll either salt my water, so I'll just put salt in there and kind of mix it up and dissolve it, or I'll take this, you see how much there is, under my tongue.
Oh, under your tongue.
Let it sit there for a second, rinse it down. You can see that was a significant amount of salt.
Right, yeah.
I've done that for years. I should be way dead of high blood pressure at this point.
So you're saying that if you don't get enough salt, then that's when you start getting headaches?
Yes. Those are all signs and symptoms of overhydrated, under sodiumed. So,
okay.
Yep. So, the recommendation is to add more salt or drink less water in that state. But yeah, a lot of times people notice poor circulation. People knew about this at the gym we were all at. People in the middle of the workout, if they weren't feeling well, feeling crappy or cold, and just had poor energy, they would come and find me and ask for the good stuff. And I'd go back in my drawer and get them what looked like a drug, and it was just salt. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. Here's the good stuff. So, exactly. Sure it is. But yeah, the water and salt is probably something we should have covered in this anyway, so I'm glad you asked. It's a really good question.
With, I don't know, that thing we just house in St. George, and in the next 2 months, we're gonna do soft water, all this.
Cool.
And I've been trying to, is reversed osmosis good? And I get so many, you get so many, and I'm like, we need soft water for sure because where we're at. But I don't know. But then, there's a thing about reverse osmosis, and it takes all the minerals.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
There are a lot of different ideas out there, and it's definitely about how much you want to spend. If I had to guess, I would guess reverse osmosis with something that would potentially add the minerals back in and or re-energize the water. Get it flowing on something. I know people that have like water that spins around in rocks and things like that. So it's moving. This gets a bit into the sticks. We don't need to get in there, but also something that does have minerals. And so I have in here as well. Yep. All the salt. So yeah, I was telling you guys about this earlier. So this is a product from Keto Chow. We have no affiliation with them, but we talked about fasting earlier. These are called fasting drops. I forgot they had a travel size container. This is very high sodium. I put that in my water from time to time as well. So this is the re-energize, or I'm sorry, that adds the minerals back in. Not only the salt I put in there. Fasting drops. They're in Draper. I swing by there all the time. Yeah, it's a cool product. I really like it.
And they're called, what's the
Keto Chow is the name. They do a protein powder that's kind of a low carb, whatever. Again, we don't have an affiliation with them. I don't use that product, but they're electrolyte products. They've got a few different ones, some with like different levels of sodium or potassium, and you can ask them which one's best for you based on your stuff, and they'll give you the right ones. And they're awesome people.
Yeah, because see, I just bought this. We did the Angels Landing, in May, and
good for you. That's a hard one.
I was so thirsty the whole time. I mean, I had water, but it was probably I should have brought some. Yep. I mean, I didn't even think of that.
It's counterintuitive, but yes.
Yeah, I was like, because I kept blaming the brand of the water.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? It's making me thirstier.
That
was the worst part of it.
Yep.
Was trying to figure out what was going on.
Yep.
Because I felt.
Good call. Yeah, good call. The other thing I do twice a week, I've got a client that lives all the way downtown, which is right on my way is Liberty Park, where they have an artesian well. So there's a water fountain at Liberty Park, and then there's another park not too far away that has 3 streams of water that is running. That I think it takes 10,000 years to go from just the mountains underground to get to where it is. Pretty cool. And that's the way we always would have had water in the past. So this is untreated. It comes right out of the spigot as spring water. Again, the way we would have always had it. And I think the taste is amazing. I think it's really viscous. It tastes like it's almost like more thick, the water.
Rusty though? I mean, I remember my grandparents,
Yeah.
having those, or no, great-grandma. I just remember it tasted, but,
Yeah.
that's all I remember.
They do test the water, but they don't treat the water. So they make sure there's not like arsenic in it or something. But that's where I get my drinking water on those days when it's convenient to me, and I notice a huge difference. And that I don't typically add salt to that water because it's already come from the earth and was not treated, so it's got more of the minerals in it. So those are all things to think about. We got about 10 minutes to wrap up our last lesson, a few last things as we're talking about lifestyle things. Obviously, sleep is going to be on there. So this is going to be a flyby. Like I said, there's more resources, including an episode I did all about sleep. I've done several, so if you need more, just reach out.
Did you do an episode about sleep?
I've done several, yeah.
Here or on just a podcast?
Yeah, on my podcast.
Okay.
Yep. So there's a link for one called Sleep is a Skill with sleep expert Molly Eastman. Like I said, I've done several. We used to live with the seasons, we used to live with the sun. So again, the idea that the sun is bad for us and causes cancer is just right along the same lines as the fat recommendations and the salt recommendations. We need the sun. The best protection for a sunburn is a tan. I always recommend that people get out in the sun. When it's not summertime, the sun is lower. You can start to build up your tolerance for sun and start to develop a tan. I'm a ginger. I burn very, very easily. I haven't had a sunburn in years. I do not use one drop of sunscreen. I think it's completely toxic.
So it's okay just to build yourself up.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't want sunburns.
No.
You want to build up your own natural innate protection from the complete rays of sunlight. It's totally normal. The worst skin cancers happen in places where the sun doesn't shine, and it usually happens to people that don't get out in the sun very much anyway. So a lot of it is just hogwash we're told to avoid, or we're told to use sunscreen. Sunscreen deactivates your own defense against sunburns, which is against overexposure of sun, which is a sunburn. It deactivates that. So it doesn't let you get a sunburn, which means it lets you stay out in the sun way longer than you should.
Oh, the sunscreen.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a chemical that's been proven to be carcinogenic and cause cancer when it's heated up, which it is when you're out in the sun. Anyway, all that to say, we used to live in the sun. We used to have light, and the light we used to have is like the big blue sky that we see here. It was a big overhead blue light, extremely bright with the sun. At night, that light goes away. It becomes really dark overhead, but we would have also had warmer lights lower to the ground, like a fire. We would have had more time in the sun in the summertime and a lot less in the wintertime. When you study these populations, they get tons of sleep in the winter and way more daylight in the summertime. That's just kind of the natural part of the seasons. But we've lost that connection with the outdoors and with the sun. And what happens is we affect what's called our circadian rhythms, and our bodies become out of sync with what the sun is doing. And what happens is our sleep then suffers. So imagine most people don't get out in the sunshine during the day. Big part of why I wanted to do this outside anyway. So they're not getting exposure to the big bright light that they need. And then rather than have a fire, they have Netflix. And Netflix has a screen, big screens now, or your phone that has blue light. And that blue light is low level mimicking the blue light that you have during the day. So not only do you not get big exposure to blue light during the day, but you're also getting it at night when you're not supposed to. What happens is your body will bring up the stress hormone cortisol to keep you awake. We're going to talk about stress here in a second. Most people associate cortisol with something negative, but cortisol is what wakes you up and gives you energy in the day so that you can be alert and aware and be alert for predators. And cortisol, the opposite to cortisol is melatonin. Melatonin is our get good sleep hormone. Some people supplement with it. All you need to do is make sure that you're getting good quality sleep or good quality sunlight during the day, and then try to be as mindful with your light at night as possible.
That's right. Yeah, that is one thing.
Yes.
Don't look at your phone before you go to bed.
Avoid any kind of lights like the plague at night. If you can put your phone on the sunlight mode, mine automatically makes my screen have way warmer colors and almost no blue light, starting at sunset and ending at sunrise. So it automatically adjusts across the year, so I don't need to change it. But yeah, if it's 7 p.m. in July, I can watch Netflix. It doesn't really bother me because it's still daytime. It still works. It's when it's nighttime that you want to just avoid screens. You can also use blue light blocking glasses. So very strongly tinted, orange tinted lenses on glasses. They don't look very fashionable, but they make it so you can't see the blue spectrum light. That can really help. You want to make sure they're very, very orange and sit really tight to your face so it doesn't leak in. Some people change the lights of their house. I've put in night lights that are low and have an amber color, or like a salt lamp, because those are the warm lights that are really good at night. So that can sometimes help, but those are the biggest things with sleep. Cool room if you can. Some people like me like to do something warming right before they go to bed, so I sit in my sauna for about 20 minutes. Some people like a warm shower that cools your body afterwards after you get out, but the light thing is the biggest. Last thing we're going to talk about is chronic stress. Chronic stress means a low-level exposure to stress for a very, very, very long time. Acute stress is what we're more used to. So this is occasional stress that would be like what we call fight, flight, or freeze, like an immediate problem that you need to deal with right now, meaning a predator. Occasionally you would come across something that wanted to kill you. You would need a release of different hormones in your body to accelerate your heart rate, to shut down digestion, to make you hyper focus on whatever problem was going on so that you could deal with it in a short term and have that problem go away and not kill you. That was the type of stress we would normally have. And then you would go back to this very low level of stress throughout most of the day, most of the week. One of the women that I've interviewed on my show has traveled to Africa and the South Pacific and all kinds of different places where they have native tribes that live the way they always used to live. They have no stress. It's crazy. Like you would think that they're like struggling for survival. They wake up, they go out, find some food, they bring it back, they eat, they sit around and chat with their families, they dance, and that's kind of their day. Like they have no stress. It's crazy. This is like any natural tribe that you go to. The middle of nowhere in Africa, the hardest places to live, and these people like hardly work. They don't do anything. They just go out on the land, grab whatever food they want, and they're fine. They don't have stress. What we have is too many screens, too much pollution, not enough time out in nature. We've got social media is a huge social stress. Like TVs everywhere telling us breaking news, CNN, this is the worst. We've got an election cycle, like you name it. We're bombarded by stress all the time, and our bodies aren't set to handle that kind of stress. All that to say, you're not going to be able to just say like, hey, move to the countryside, never have stress, but try to incorporate things in your life to help you deal with the stress. So breathing practices, getting outside, being in nature, forest bathing, they call it. Meditation practices can help. I think that the stress in the body of eating the wrong foods, crappy foods like the sugars and the seed oils and all that stuff, getting that out can improve your chronic stress. You see all the things that stress affects in the body over time. Just being mindful of that. Again, having a gratitude practice, whatever it is for you that helps decrease your stress overall in life is generally a very healthy thing. That is the very last part of the seminar series. This has been awesome. This has been so much fun. I'm so grateful for you guys for coming. This has been great. We're getting really bamboozled by a lot of people who are making tons and tons of money on us. And they make money when they get somebody sick at a really young age and keep them sick for a really long time. If you look at what that is in the medical system and the pharmaceuticals and the food systems and realize when we live the way that they're telling us to live and we're getting sick and they're profiting in every level on all of that, they don't have our best interests at heart. So learning some of this stuff hopefully helps us realize that we're getting lied to, we're getting profited on, we can live more in accordance of the way we should, and we can live long and really healthy, happy lives. So that's the end.
Well, I appreciate it. I wish I could have came to all of
Oh,
it.
that's all good. I'm so glad you came to these, as many as you did.
Yeah. And then just like I missed last week. Well, I was with Bethany.
Yeah.
So just go. You're like, oh.
Yeah, here's this.
Okay.
Do you want we did a quiz. Yeah, on the thing.
Okay.
On the thing, you can find a quiz to tell. Basically, last week was all about moderators and abstainers.